Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. So we have two podcasts this week. This is the second one of the week, and I am so excited for this episode to finally air. I have been waiting for so long for this one to go out. I guess I probably recorded it with Mike like a few months ago. I'm going to say maybe 2 months ago. I've been in a fucking time warp since January, so who knows when I recorded this, but I'm going to say around Feb, maybe really early March. Anyway, if you watched Married at First Sight, from back in 2019, it was season 6 of Married at First Sight in Australia. You might have remembered good old Mike, very Aussie bloke, Mike Gunner, and I'm so excited for him to be on the podcast today. I loved this. I loved in episode 41 where Mike said, it was one of those the end of the podcast, some of the episodes, they would all be in that room together and the couples would come up and have quote unquote couples counseling, honestly, which was just the biggest load of shit, those couple counseling sessions. I was like, we all need some fucking trauma release in this. Man, the trauma that was being shown out of these people in the series was astonishing, to say the least. And it honestly made my blood boil when the counselors would, just some of the things they would say. I'm like, that doesn't help anybody. We need some fucking somatic release in here, people. There is trauma coming out of the woodworks. Anyway, whatever. So in episode 41, Mike said that women cannot cope under as much pressure as men can. And as you guys would know as my listeners, this is correct. This is biology. There's nothing wrong with that. We can celebrate that. Men and women are different. We have different strengths to men. Men have different strengths to us. Let's just put the rest to bed and stop being victims. Anyway, of course, and I'm used to it, Mike received a lot of backlash for this statement because of obviously how politically incorrect it was, and that, quote unquote, he's a misogynist, which we all know that's not what this is. Anyway, so I am really excited to have Mike on the podcast to jam with me about the topics that you guys know I love diving into. The topic of gender roles and feminism, letting men lead, chivalry, masculine, feminine, all those things. And I really encourage you guys, obviously trigger warning, and I really encourage you guys to listen with open ears, especially if you're a new listener that has come in from Mike's audience. Please listen to the episode with open ears and an open mind. Remain curious. Remember that you don't need to take everything we say as the Bible. Be discerning. Allow yourself to have your own beliefs, opinions, whatever, and just take what we're saying as added information to help you form a belief that you feel really, really solid in. And everything that we're talking about, you guys have heard in different ways on my podcast before, but I just love having Mike on here and having a man talk about this stuff so openly and honestly, because he is one of millions of men that wish they could say this stuff out loud, but are really afraid in doing so. And I'm really glad to have Mike on because he is just like me, very unapologetic about talking about this stuff. And I'm honestly honored that he was able to give us an hour of his time and really, really grateful for it. So on the episode, we're diving into obviously the varied response on Mike's opinion on the show from different cultures. It was really interesting. I did ask him this question. I get asked this question a lot of how cultures, do I notice that men from different countries and cultures show up differently with dating and relationships? And the answer is absolutely. So that was really interesting to dive into the double standards of communication between men and women, how what true feminism is, and how radical feminism is changing how men approach women. And then, of course, women complain about men. But I'm like, hello, can you see what's happening here? And then, obviously, how Mike deals with emasculation. So you guys are going to love this episode. I'm so excited. Without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I have Mike Gunner here, and he was one of the men in Married at First Sight, which was done in 2019, or it came out in 2019. And on episode of 41, he said that women can't cope under as much pressure as men can. And obviously, all know me. I was like, oh my God, I love this man for saying that. But obviously he got some pretty bad backlash. And as you guys know, I'm very fond of kind of helping us dismantle this political correctness around men and women, and just understanding ourselves as biological beings and not trying to shove us into something that fits a political agenda. So I thought I'd have Mike on to chat about this. And obviously he kind of is on the same page as me about everything. So welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, of course. So do you want to kind of introduce yourself to everybody and just let people know what Married at First Sight was? And why don't you paint the picture of like this comment and like the truth behind it?
Okay. Well, I was, as you mentioned, on season 6 of Married at First Sight, which shot in 2018, was aired in 2019. And it was quite a unique experience, obviously, you can imagine. And it was shown all over the world. And also, you mentioned earlier that it was received differently within various different cultures. Some people took it in their stride, and others, found it upon themselves to want to troll us all, actually, all the cast. So, it was received differently in different cultures, and I found that quite fascinating, actually. But that comment that you mentioned, look, I mean, and I did apologise about it later, but you got to learn to read a room, don't you? There's no point antagonising the masses when you can just say a few gentle words and sort of undo all that. I didn't realise that having an opinion on gender politics issues could be so polarizing.
But it is.
Right. I mean, look, you got to remember that I don't hate women at all. I mean, in fact, I was raised by
love
women.
them.
Sure, absolutely. And so, you got to remember that. And I don't think that people imagine that I didn't. I think a lot of the time people look for reasons just to kind of destroy one another. And I suppose I gave them something like a reason to do that. But that was a shame, because I made an observation that to me made sense in the moment. I mean, literally at the time I said it, I was under fire from maybe a half a dozen women in general. And I suppose I just lashed out a bit. I was frustrated and I was offended. And I said what I said because that's what I saw unfolding then and there in front of me. And how dare I make that clear and concise observation, because, well, that's no place for a man to have an opinion on what women are like. I think as well, I should expand a little bit on the explanation, and I did say, I said, look, groups of women don't handle pressure as well as groups of men handle pressure. That's verbatim what I said. Now, what I really should have said, and because that was pretty sweeping and generalizing. It was a pretty general statement, and one that I wished I had made in a different way. I wished I'd said, look, in general, within a group of women, there's more judgment, there's more competition, there's more comparison, there's more insecurity between women, whereas men tend not to have that. We don't compare ourselves as harshly to other men. We don't have competition about who's the most handsome and who's the most likable or whatever it might be. That seems to be a thing with women, though. I mean, and many, many women have come forward and said, oh, yeah, absolutely. That's what we do.
But it is true. Like, I've done episodes on it before of, like, biologically, when you look at caveman days, and our brains are still the same, right? Because we need security in, like, and we get security in community, we feel threatened by women, and therefore we will try and weed out competition. Like, it's what you said is actually factually correct. But often what's factually correct, people don't want to hear. And it's very politically, like, incorrect. Even just to say women have more insecurities than men, I guarantee, like, you'd be ripped a new one, even if you said that. I feel like no matter what you would have said, there would have been plenty of women that would have taken it as an attack on women instead of allowing themselves to just be like, oh, yeah, that's a fact. Moving on. The end.
Yeah. Look, and I was going to say something. I mean, look, let me just explain something to you for a minute.
Yes.
In that series, there was one particular guy who, look, there was a cheating scandal.
Right.
He was silly. He was silly to get involved. In fact, I'd warned him against it. Said, look, there's going to be no winners in this. You're going to come off looking like a villain. You're going to look silly. don't go there. And hey, lo and behold, he did, against my better judgment. But this is a 27-year-old man. I'm a 47-year-old man. So old head, young shoulders, never going to happen. So he's gone and done it anyway. Now, he was a really nice guy, a really easygoing, friendly, likable guy. The two women that he sort of had become, intertwined with, to my mind, they were not anywhere near as likable as him. In fact, the first thing that one of them had said to me was that it was a rude comment about how I asked her, use the term sweetheart, and she chastised me for that in a group setting. So she had no problem detracting from my character. And the other one was just the same, pretty vile, actually, with some of the things that she's said since as well. So these were people that were my favorites, and yet they were sat criticizing him, and with in his absence, mind you. And so I stuck up for him, and I've got these two girls coming at me just in the most hurtful fashion. And remember that, there's a double standard, a recurring double standard all the time, where women can speak to men a certain way, but you do not speak to a woman that way.
I always draw on that. It's like,
right.
It's the double standards are so bad. And it's like, well, people will allow a double standard if it suits them, but if it doesn't suit them, then they have a reason to like chop someone's balls off.
That's right. And this is, you mentioned third wave feminism.
Yeah.
Look, the first wave feminism, on the face of it, I'm all for it. Look,
duh. Like, you'd be weird not to be. Like, true feminism is just equality, like equal standards, equal pay. Like, duh, everyone's for that.
Absolutely. Look, and to take it further again, I mean, just a man's approach toward a woman, using courtesy and being a gentleman, pulling the chair out. I'm not going to lay my, jacket over a puddle for you. That would be ridiculous. But I will be mindful of that you're a little gentler than me, and I'm going to want to take care of you because that's what men should do, right? And I've long said this. It's a lost art to be. Maybe it's not lost, but young guys seem. It should come instinctively, shouldn't it?
And the thing is, though, it does come instinctively to you guys. Like, you guys are biologically wired to provide and protect for females, like across the board. That's why, right. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're dating the woman that is in trouble across the road or not. You would go, and your instinct would be to go and protect her. But I've done so much research for my book, and it's so interesting, like the change in that, and that now so many men feel like they have to just double check themselves, and they have to go against their biological nature because they're afraid of like their whole name, their career, everything being ruined because of an innate desire to provide and protect. And it's like, what the thing that drives me up the wall is that the amount of women that complain about there are no good men, where's all the chivalry gone? And at the same time, they're the women that are cutting men down. I'm like, babe, check yourself.
Yeah, that's right. It's you sort of take with one hand, give with another, and it's very emasculating, and men don't know where they stand. I mean, we're trying to find a middle ground here, and good. Look, there's plenty of great women. My mother is probably an excellent example.
Perfect.
And men need to know their place and women theirs, and that's where life and society will be more cohesive. But I think what you've found now is that this equality. I mean, equality would mean that the scales are set about even, but it's just going that way now. It's
correct.
Like, hey, I'm all for equality, but let's keep it equal.
It's a manhunt now. We've lost the equality now. It's just women on a fucking manhunt. Instead of there being a witch hunt, it's gone like literally we've like swung the pendulum to the other side. On the topic of emasculation, Mike, how have you experienced, whether it's in the show or just generally speaking, how have you experienced emasculation?
Look, in general and show, okay. Look, I don't let it happen.
Love it. Good answer. That's a fucking man. No, that's a man.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm wired that way. I'm a gentleman first and foremost, and I'm courteous to men and women. And I think that, that's where you should start. They're your fundamentals. Beyond that, if somebody's going to try and be emasculating, I'm very sensitive to it. I know it almost before it's happening. I can tell it's coming, and I just dig the heels in, and I won't allow it. And it doesn't matter, man, woman, or child. I will say something to you.
Love it.
I will put an end to it then and there, in a gentle fashion, though. Having said that, but see, I'm also equipped with different tools to most. You know, I have. I don't hesitate to not. I avoid confrontation. There's a big difference between being assertive and being aggressive. I'm certainly very assertive.
Correct.
But I draw the line. You know, I fall short of being aggressive. That there's no winners in that. You know, you got to be calm, and you've got to, you know, be mindful and keep your wits about you during that moment of conflict, to make your point and to make it strongly, and to actually educate your opponent to look. Don't try that on again. And this would be the reason why, because you look silly and there's no winners in this. And just, you know, why would you go there? Like, come on, change your thinking on this. And so I'm fortunate in that I don't let it happen. But I watch men and women, for that matter, you know, emasculating one another. And the person who's is kind of projecting that emasculation looks just weak themselves, and when the intention was to somehow strengthen themselves. And the person on the receiving end, I mean, they don't look like much either, unless they're in a position to be able to explain themselves and to defend themselves and to gently stand up for what's right. But look, there's a lot of moving parts in there, I know, but I think, you know, the last 3 years I've copped it. Right, like I've copped it. So I've sort of mastered the art of knowing the battles to engage in, the ones to walk away from and ignore, but the ones that don't mean anything to me, and the ones that are important. So, you know, you got to read a room, and you've got to understand that it's not worth fighting every battle,
right.
But there are some that kind of pique your interest, and you think, well, okay, it's time to take the gloves off and get stuck into this.
I feel like there was so much emasculation, and what you said about the insecurity is bang on. Like when a woman or a man is emasculating somebody else, it's them projecting their insecurity onto that person. And I feel like there was so much of that on the TV show, of just the women emasculating the men. And like, sometimes it was really hard for me to watch, like, because it was just out of control. And it's like a high quality woman that it loves being a woman, that's proud to be a woman, wants a man that's like a high quality man and would never tear somebody down. So it's really interesting when women these days think that it shows some kind of like confidence, or it shows like power for them to rip a man down. But it's like that actually has the reverse effect. And I find it very interesting when these women go around doing all this, like, oh, you're a sexist, like feminism crap. But I'm like, but if you actually understood feminism, like the true feminists are now writing books being like, what the fuck's happened? This was not the intention. This has gone too far. So I find it very interesting when people are like, I'm a feminist. I'm like, if you actually understood feminism, you would know that what's happening right now isn't feminism.
Yeah. Well, you look at your Clementine Fords. I don't know if you heard of that name.
Oh, she has ripped me down more times than I can count. And you know what's funny? Like, I've done posts before of like, let men be men, let women be women. And it's kind of what we're saying, right? My listeners know all about it. I've done other ones of like why I do not label myself as a feminist. And then I explain like what we're talking about and like, put the disclaimers in. But of course, what's so interesting to me, it's all market research, which is the most entertaining bit, is that this feminist who's all female empowerment has the need, and somehow it's female empowerment, to take my Instagram post and then slander me, rip me apart, and like twist my words to suit her narrative. And I don't care about it, because to me, and then all the DMs that I get of just these angry feminists, quote unquote feminists, to me, I'm like, you realize this is proving my point. Like, this proves my point of when I'm saying women are unhappy because they're trying to be someone that they're not. And then you're blowing up my DMs with death threats. I'm like, you're proving my point, bitches.
Yeah. Look, yeah, you're right. And you could, I have engaged with this woman, obviously,
right.
You know, I was,
of course,
can't
imagine what she did to you.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it was outrageous, the things that she said and did. And
wow.
the irony of her words being so hurtful and trying to explain how I'm somehow an offensive human being. It's like, come on, what are you doing? Do you not see what you're doing here? Like, you just look so ridiculous. But I did engage. It's for, you know, because you would think that you were going to get something a little more intelligent.
Right.
You know, this is a published author. I mean, that means nothing. I mean,
Right.
anyone
Right.
can write a book, right?
Correct.
But you know, she'd made a name for herself and she had a pretty decent following. I thought, all right, you know what, I'll go there. And she put something up about me on her own Instagram post. And so I delved in there and I went in and I started chatting to sort of the people who had written comments and I mean, it was immediately hostile.
Right.
And she's kind of surfaced, you know,
Right.
and one thing I learned very quickly with feminist, you know, her minions, let's say, you are not going to win that argument. It wouldn't matter if you agreed with them, you're still losing. Any opinion that doesn't align perfectly with theirs is considered to be false and heresy. And it's. I mean, I learned very quickly. Don't even go into that dragon's lair.
It's interesting, though, isn't that? Like, to me, it's very fascinating. When I've said this before as well, of like, I've got a chapter on this. Actually, it's titled "Women Supporting Women is Bullshit," and the reason why I say that is because, like, all these women claim to be supporting women, but then they rip down people that don't agree with their exact opinions. And so when you really look at like the definition of feminism, for example, I'm like, this is not that. You're so angry and you feel the need to project your anger onto somebody else that doesn't agree with you. And it's like, maybe you should figure out where that anger is coming from, because from all of my clients, that anger, when you heal that anger and when you get rid of it, then you actually are able to figure out like, oh, this is what I actually want as a woman. And it's so fascinating to me. When COVID started, I have never had so many DMs. I did an episode on it or something or other. I've never had so many DMs of women being like, I've realized this year that I want to work less. I just want to like look after my kids, cook food at home, make a garden, and just like, I actually want to do less in my life. And it was like this opportunity for so many women to realize how stressed they were and like their true natural desires. And we haven't, like, people think that it's like some made up social construct for women to like looking after kids. I'm like, no, actually it's biology and fucking hormones. And that cannot be swayed by, you know, a political agenda.
Right. Look, I mean, this is instinctive. You know,
Exactly.
Your desire to want to nurture and nourish and have little gardens on the veranda and, I don't know, pet your cat. I mean, these are things that make us all feel good, and that's what women do. You know, we hunt, you gather, and that's just, look.
Nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that,
and that's the main thing. It's like
very good.
Exactly. Like, we need both. We can't hunt. You guys can't gather as well as we can.
Women could probably hunt just fine.
Oh, but not for as long.
Can.
Right. But not for as long as a period. Like, we'd burn out and we would have a fucking meltdown because our nervous systems can't deal with it. If we needed to, we could go and like kill a deer and feed it to our children. But we couldn't do it for days on end. You guys could do it for days on end. If you guys needed to, you know, hug your child, you could hug your child, but would you feel fulfilled and could you do it for days on end? No. And it's nothing wrong with that. It's like, you don't have the hormonal profile for that. You guys have way too much testosterone and we have way too much estrogen and not enough testosterone in order to hunt for the amount of time that you guys can hunt, for example.
Here's a question. Do you think that, look, I mean, you could argue that it's probably since maybe the 40s that feminism started to kind of take rise, you know, certainly gather momentum. And I feel as though it's a human or a social, it's a social construct. You know, This is an instinctive. This is something where enough people have sort of said, well, hang on a second. I'm seeing my husband and he's got all these benefits to his life that I'm not enjoying because I'm at home with the kids and maybe I want to go back to work. You know, so the snowball started to roll at that point. Now, and there's a lot of good things that have come from it. You know, women have got more rights, and I mean, there's a time when women couldn't vote. Like, that's ridiculous, right?
Correct.
Like, unbelievable.
We can all agree on that. We can all agree on that. Yeah.
Exactly. There's some fundamental things that, seriously, I mean, how it ever existed that way, you think, my God, really? Like, my great granddad went for that shit? Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
He suffers because women suffer in that instance, right? So, and you know, the 50s and 60s and 70s, these ideas built more and more, and there was more enthusiasm for them, and men understood more so why women were feeling that the way that they were, and looking for a bigger piece of the pie. And ultimately, they are getting that. They've got it, and maybe not everything they ever wanted, or maybe not everything they ever should get. But and I definitely believe in equality.
Right.
But I feel like now that we've gotten to a point where, you know, we're sort of starting to we've reached a saturation point now. It's like, look, I think we're at a point where, look, let's start to understand that we're not androgynous. There are men and women, right? There's a distinct difference between the two. I feel like society was somehow trying to push us all into the same kind of funnel, and well, hang on, we're not going to fit down there because she's different to me. You know, I'm a guy, that's a woman. And I feel as though now the dust is almost settling, you know, and you know, water will always find its place. You know, water always looks for the lowest possible point. And I feel like in a situation like this, societies tend to, you know, ideas within societies tend to find their ultimate resting place. And so the ideas that came with feminism that work and work well, I think those will stay. And the ones that came along with it that they're just not going to work, I think they'll just fall away, and they'll find their spot, and that is that it's just not to be. So I feel like we're coming to a point now where, you know, and there's a desperation to hang on to every concept that
I know.
And it's like, look, yeah, the ones that work, that's great. Hang on to those. The others, they're clearly not. Let it go. and your Clementine Fords, they want everything. They want it all and more.
And you can't do it all.
Well, you can't. It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And like, that's not me being anti-feminist. So that's not me being a woman hater. Calm down. Like, it's not going to work for you either. You know?
Quote that. Like, that could be a fucking quote. It's true though. It's true. So when we were talking about before, like the differences that you noticed in cultures, can you share a little bit about what you noticed in the difference in cultures when it came to like your fans and the feedback that you got from the show?
Yeah, sure. Look, what's interesting, the Europeans and Americans actually were big fans of mine.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if it's an Australian cultural thing. You know, you would be aware of the expression tall poppy syndrome.
Oh, God.
And it is true. I mean, I don't think it's just Australia. It's not just unique to Australia, but, you know, where somebody does really well and then everybody that didn't do so well has to kind of cut them down, you know, like the tall poppy. Like, they want to bring everyone down to about the same level. Of course, that's not possible in every case, but certainly that's what a lot of people try to do. There's just this jealousy, their own insecurities that you know, manifest as being trying to detract from somebody else's success. I found that a lot in Australia, whereas in England and sorry, let me get rid of this. Am I still doing my thing here? Because I can't tell.
I can't see you, but I can hear you.
And then accept. Send a voicemail. There we go. I can never get the. Okay.
All good. I know, it's confusing.
So the English, because, you know, there's 4 countries in the UK: England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and Northern Ireland, I suppose. They are very direct. You know, they've got a very different sense of humour, as it were, and I think that often reflects the way that they perceive life, actually, for that matter. And they were very welcoming of me and my direct nature, and you know, there was way less judgment, way less criticism. And Holland, in for that matter, as well. The Dutch people are known to be very direct in their way that they communicate, and they are. You know, I spent time over there once upon a time, 20 years ago, and people are just very direct. It's just how they communicate. And so they're like, you know what, Mike, we think you're great. New Zealand and Australia got my ass kicked. In America, I got a lot of love as well. And now, you got to wonder as well if part of that is that there's a sense of ownership. Me being Australian, maybe the Australians felt more comfortable to tear apart one of their own. And but having said that, look, I got a lot of love too. I got a lot of love, more love than hate. But it's funny like that. That it's the hate that kind of that stays with you.
Of
You know, you can read
course.
100 great comments, but there's one, and that's the one you.
Well, yeah, you don't want to
fixate on.
feel like someone's misreading and manipulating your character when like your intention wasn't to do anything wrong, but they've perceived it as like you're some villain.
Well, that's right. I mean, and there's nothing you can do about that either, by the way. People's opinion of you, it's not going to change if you say, and we're talking like this is a heavily edited television show. This is a show about love that's for entertainment. I mean, what you see is probably 60% of the truth. You know, you say the words, yes, but the way that they change the chronology and remove the context and add and change things around, that they can make it look however the heck they like. And so you are misrepresented immediately. And there's nothing you can do about that. You just got to accept it.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, that comment that I made, like you said, I did come out later on and I said, oh, well, let's try and see what happens if I just back away from that and apologize for that comment. And here's one for you. Interestingly, I got barely anyone, you know, to acknowledge the fact that I had retracted that comment. And to answer your earlier question, no, I meant that comment, but and to apologize for it was really just me trying to, I don't know, smooth it over. But no one had anything to say at that point. No one cared. It was like the damage was done, or that they're like, oh, he's just saying that because, you know, he's copped a lot of stick for it and doesn't want to have to hear that anymore and tries to make amends. But you know what? And that's what's led me to believe I literally don't care what people
Which
say.
I love.
One of the things the best life lessons that you can learn, don't worry about what people think about you, because it means nothing. It really means nothing. It was Buddha that said, you know, he said your whole life is lived in between your ears. Like our whole life, you know, you can make yourself feel good. You can make yourself feel miserable just with the way you think. And why would you let somebody else's opinion of you affect how you feel? And I let it affect how I feel. But then I saw myself doing that and thought, what am I doing this for? Like, these are just trolls. These are people who either don't, they got no impact in my life. They've got really no effect on my day-to-day. And so why would I let them? And honestly, literally overnight, I just stopped caring.
Which I love. I'm so glad.
There's so much freedom in that.
Yeah. Well, also, though, I always say that the way people react to something tells you so much more about them than you. So, like, you know, the Clementine Fords of the world, let's just say, like the way that she demonizes and pulls down people for their opinions says so much more about her and her character than it does about like you or I, for example. So last question, Mike, and I'll let you go, is how do you think that, or if, let's say, for example, this like fourth wave feminism like continues to go and men continue to get emasculated all the time and how do you think, in your opinion, this will affect future boys?
Look,
and women, actually, and women.
I couldn't tell you. All I do know is that young men, they need role models. You know,
leadership.
Back when I was. You do. You need to be able to
I'm like, where are the good men? Like, besides like you leading, like, I'm like, so many of these male leaders are pushovers. They're not actually they're trying to like suit everybody's needs. And like you see in politics, like these men are trying to like, you know, make sure that like everybody's happy with what they're doing instead of being like what is truly right, even if it rocks the boat. And that's what I'm going to stand for. I tell you what, I'm the Florida governor. He's an example of a fucking man. That is like, I fucking know what's right. I don't care how many feathers this ruffles. This is what I'm standing for. I'm like, that's a man. And so many men are just afraid. And we're losing that like powerful leadership.
Yeah. Look, I know DeSantis. I'm not a fan, in honesty. But then again, you know, I'm a Democrat. Well, I'm Australian, so I'm neither, am I? But I do tend to side with the Democrats of the United States. But look, strong male leadership, it has to come with some amount of vulnerability. So, I mean, you can't always be right. You can try your best, but you won't always be right. So you got to understand when you have to listen to others and be able to accept criticism and opinions that are constructive. But if you've got sort of some strength of character, and like I was saying, these young men, that they need to have role models, men that don't really take a backward step, but that have a good moral compass, that treat others respectfully and kindly, and that are likable people. I mean, these are the sort of men that young boys need to look up to.
I love that.
Not people pleasers that are trying to get somewhere politically, or you look at the media, right? The media is and it is generally controlled by women and beta males. Okay, that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. The opinions of strong feminist women and beta males seems to be sort of where it's at. If you oppose those, you are going to get destroyed. And I'm telling you, the conversations I have with journalists and whatnot, and I'm just thinking, like, how are you not agreeing with what I'm saying? Because it doesn't align with the status quo. And if you step out even just a little bit, the nail that sticks out gets hammered, right? And there's just this narrative within media and media has a huge effect on children and people in general. They see what's expected of them, and they try and
believe
conform to that,
right?
And there's just not a lot of strong men and male opinions in there, because often those are a little jarring, but they're necessary at times. And so that's where a Mike Gunner character comes along and says some stuff on MAFS, and the whole world's like, this guy's, what's his problem?
You know what? The amount of times I've wanted to, and I wouldn't, but like the amount of times I wanted to just go on one of those shows like The Bachelor or some shit and just ruffle up feathers and bring in my like, let men be men, let women be women stuff, just to like prove a fucking point, is hilarious. But I think also with the media stuff, it's not even just like that you need men that, like have your opinions and my opinions. It's just allowing people to have different opinions and encouraging people to respect that, encouraging people to be open to hearing about it, and not like sticking to like, well, this is what I grew up believing and this is what I've been brainwashed to believe, so therefore I have to believe this. And even as an example, the amount of people that, it's so funny. I love these cases where people would listen to my podcast, be like, fuck this bitch, she's crazy, what is she talking about? Then something would happen in like the dating life and be like, okay, let me listen to Monica again, listen to it, be like, fuck, she's right, start implementing it, their whole life changes. And I'm like, interesting. And it's all you need is a little bit of like open-mindedness to be like, maybe I'm not right, maybe there's another way. And I'm sure you can agree with me, Mike, in that like we're not sitting here saying that we're perfect and that our opinions are like the right way. I believe that no one's right, no one's wrong, and everyone just needs to have an open mind, but tune into what feels right. And like, you can't tell me all these angry women running around that feels really right to them to be living like that.
Right. Look, absolutely. They'll try it for a while, but they'll always come back to what works. And and if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. God put us on this earth and created us slightly differently. Just embrace that, enjoy it, and live and let live, for goodness sake.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mike, for your time. I really appreciate it. Are there any last words that you want to like tell the listeners or anything?
No, just keep Ukraine in your thoughts, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's really,
I'm like, when is one another?
Yeah, like, can the world just like chill? Can we just go on pause for a second?
Right. You know what I mean? Hey, now there's a leader, by the way, that's Zelensky.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's a fucking leader. Exactly. Amen to that. I think we can end on that note. Great note to end on. Love it.